Hello and welcome to the Survivor Corners podcast. I'm Kirk.
Hello? Can you hear
Yep,
me?
you're on.
I am Toastybits. I just noticed that the other panel, the panel where your webcam is like gone, so I don't know if I'm actually
Yeah, you're
audible.
still on. Yeah, it changes with the source.
Got it.
So Toastybits is filling in for Jitwire this week, and what we've been doing with this co-host fill-in thing is that I've been allowing the co-host to decide the topic for the chat today. And so last week when Zach did it, he wanted to talk about the differences the DLC has made. And then when Toasty suggested, I thought it was a really good follow-up. And I'll let him explain that. But first, let's say hello to everybody that's here. Fox Gray, Castle, Lucky. I'm going to butcher this one. Francosis, Wandering, Faye. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you. Dr. Quantum, welcome.
Hello there.
So, Toasty, what did you want to talk about today?
Just first before we start, you are sounding a little bit robotic-y, just so you know.
Okay.
It's coming in clear, and then it suddenly turns robotic. But yeah, today, it's great follow-up from last week's episode. I will be following up on Zach's episode about how the Tales expansion changed the Long Dark, and we're going to be talking about the Tales themselves. More specifically, Rudiger's project and the Tales trilogy, because there's technically a fourth tale. Maybe we'll save that for another day. We'll see. But today we're talking about the Signal Void, Buried Echoes, and Last Horizon Tales. Before we begin, I want to specify that we are going to be talking about these the story of the Rudiger's project in chronological order. We're not going to be talking about it in Tales order because some of the Tales, at least portions of some of them, are out of order. So we're going to be talking about it in chronological order to kind of make it more of a cohesive story. Before I begin, I guess I should say again, because I did clarify one thing before, I will clarify this. A lot of this would be speculation on my part or on the community's part, because there's just a lot about the tales that are not explained thoroughly. So a lot of it, we just kind of have to guess off of what we know. So there is going to be some speculation here. Some people are probably not going to agree with what I say. That's totally fine. You're more than welcome to leave a comment in the chat, maybe to share your thoughts on one aspect or another, or kind of like a rebuttal for what I'm saying. If you want to do that, that's totally fine. And if anyone's ever confused about any moment in the tales, let us know. I think I had one other thought, but no, that's fine. It'll probably come to me later. Do you have anything else to say, Kirk, before we continue?
No, I think we're good to go.
All right.
Piccolo, hello. Wandering, if I didn't catch you earlier.
Okay. So, where does it all begin? Well, Kirk and I were talking about this, how the nature of Rudiger and his work, and we'll save that part for later, but it starts with Rudiger's ambitions, his work. He is a scientist at heart. Later on, we would learn he focuses on geology and maybe geophysics as well. And so he wanted to create what would be known as his horizon. In scientific terms, this is like a revolutionary discovery in a specific field of science, something that would change that specific field of science forever. And so that's whenever he says he has seen in the new horizon, that's what he's talking about. Last Horizon, that is specifically talking about his scientific revolution, the thing that he wanted to essentially bring about in the world that would change the world. And that was through geology. And we know throughout the whole, story of the Long Dark, that Great Bear Island is a geological masterpiece, kind of. It's full of seismic activity. It's got tons and tons of different fault lines underneath, creating the mountain ranges that we cross and climb. And so this was the perfect place for him to study the Earth. So the nature of his project was and always has been geological in nature. So he, in his later stage of life, wants to perform an experiment. And he specifically is following in the footsteps of a scientist known as EW in the game. EW may or may not have a real life counterpart. I might butcher the name. The name is Emil Vichert, I believe. It's a German name. Again, there's a lot of German influence in the game. And Emil Vichert's real life work was in geophysics and also other fields of physics as well. But one of the things he was most known for was for creating one of the most important revolutions in how we see the Earth. One of the first modern models for the interior of the Earth, the different layers, that has since been more refined, but Emil's work was very revolutionary at the time in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So we can assume that this is the EW that he's talking about, and it kind of makes sense with the things that he says later on in Last Horizon, when he discusses how like Great Bear Island's secrets were supposed to help him create his new horizon, essentially. So we don't know if he was working with this company before or if this was something new to him, but he has this project greenlit by John Industries. I think John is the correct pronunciation. It is a German name, by the way. It is an alternate way of saying Johann, I believe. It's another pronunciation and spelling of Johann, which is basically just John in English. So his project is greenlit, and at the same time, there's evidence in the airfield that there was someone from the project performing reconnaissance. They're doing a security sweep and found that the airfield is not ideal because there is only one way out through the road. But the project got greenlit anyways, and so they would begin regardless of the security issues on Great Bear Island. So they decided that it would be better to come through the coast. That's where one of the first notes we can find tells us the project begins, is they would travel by boat, land on the coast, take the railroad over with all of their personnel and their supplies. And that would then lead them to the Langston mine. This was a mine that was a coal mine at first, and then I believe it turned into a uranium mine later, and then would close. We don't know when it closed, but I think it's safe to assume it was closed before Rudiger's project started. Wandering Firekeeper said, good question, Francois. Let's see what Francois' question was. Is Rudiger's machine the reason for everyone on the island losing their connection to reality? We'll get to that later. That's a good question, though.
We'll circle around.
Yeah, it's because it's more important for much later.
I do have one thing I want to ask you.
Yeah.
Now, and this is in relationship to what you were talking about with the New Horizon. Would this be a good analogy of saying that he was looking for his Einstein moment or his Newton moment of discovering something that was just on par, above and beyond anything else?
He was basically trying to find a discovery so massive that he would be the grandfather of modern day geology, essentially. That's what I was thinking. He was trying to revolutionize this specific field of science and be known for that. And throughout, from his testament speech, which is a very key document from the Tales, we get a lot of information on his past. Like he's done all sorts of work, and he's become famous from it and gained wealth from it and influence, but like he wasn't satisfied with all that work, so he was trying to really make it big, essentially, in the scientific world. And that's where this experiment led him. All right, let's continue. So now the entire team is at the mine, and they're also in the bunkers. We just still don't know what they were doing at the bunkers, so that is still part of the mystery that remains behind the project. But in the Langston mine, that's where a core of the actual story takes place in. And we know a lot about what was happening in there. So I assume that this project team is like a mishmash of different people. We have what might be miners, people that were familiar with mining underground and, building scaffolding, things to keep from the earth from collapsing. And then maybe engineers that would help, build the machine and any other equipment, computers and whatnot underground. We don't really know, but let's just assume that we have people that are needed in order to keep the mine from collapsing and also building all of the machinery. And then we have the security chief, who's responsible for security, the medical officer, which I believe doesn't technically come in until later, and then of course Rudiger, and the foreman. And so they begin work on the Langston mine. They need to stabilize it, keep it from falling apart, but the island is very prone to earthquakes. Eventually they find the chamber where we can find the machine in game. It's the chamber on the ledge above the concentrator. In there they would build the machine, and they would also be bringing in generators in order to power the machine. And those, I believe, are linked to a note in the airfield mentioning mysterious cargo, and also the other note about the helicopters flying in. There's a lot of notes in the airfield that I thought for a long time were not connected to the tales, but I think it was literally last night when I realized every single note at the airfield is related to the tales in some way. Some of them are very subtle, but they give hints that this connects to this part of the tale, this connects to this part, and so on. So there was a period where Rudiger just kind of disappears, but then he comes back and he presents the miner or the workers. I'll just say the members because I don't know what they really are. He presents the members with a contract, and the foreman notes that some of the contract seems suspicious, and then afterwards some of the team members were not satisfied. And I think that's where a security chief's note is connected when she mentions that Team 3 is not on, not cooperating right with the rest of the project. I think that's why. It's because of the contract that Rudiger presented them. We don't know what's in the contract, but I think the foreman kind of alludes to the idea that they had to remain on the project in order to get paid. And so they just agreed to finish the project as quickly as possible. And that's what the security chief mentioned. She hopes they could keep their truce together long enough to finish the project. I think that's why some of the members were upset. And so that would lead to some of the team members being relieved of their job. They would be taken out by extra security out of the mine and out of the project. All this is underground. So there's a lot of different moments in the tales where all the characters are like saying they have this uneasy feeling. And this is before the machine is even turned on. They don't like being underground. It's like being trapped. It's like if you have claustrophobia, it's that feeling essentially just all the time. But I assume they also went to the surface at some point. Maybe like some people will take a break and go to the idle camp, or some people would go to the bunkers. Again, we still don't know what the bunkers are for. Castle, good point. I should probably mention this earlier. So I believe this takes place in the early 80s, because there is a note at the airfield that I believe is from whoever did the recon at the airfield, to determine the safety issues. They leave a date, and then that is very important, because all across the Long Dark there are very few notes that actually have dates, and there are 2 notes in the Far Territory that have dates on them. The one from the airfield, I think it's in the hangar, talking about how there's some security concerns from the airfield because there's very few escape routes, but also it mentions that I think the build has been greenlit, which is a very key word. You don't usually use that word for any regular thing. It's like greenlighting a project or a game or something like that. So basically Rudiger's project was greenlit in that moment from John Industries, the funder essentially of the whole thing. So that note has the date September 25th, 1982. And then thanks to the foreman's notes, at least in buried echoes, there are actual number of days that they were down below. The project runs for over 2 months before they realize, oh, there is something going on here, and we are all sick for some reason. Because the last note from the foreman that has a number, it's like 64 days, I believe, so it's 2 months later. So we are in like November, maybe December by the time the tales end of 1982. So going back, the machine has been built, and everything seems normal at first, but everyone's still getting that uneasy feeling. But this time it's a little different. It's a little more like a how do I explain it? Like your brain is being tickled almost, kind of. Everyone describes it a little differently. And I want to stop here for a moment because I want to see if we have any questions here, because right now we've gotten to the point where the machine has been built and turned on. So does anyone have any questions? Elijah says it's way before the collapse. Yes, this is like 30 years before the collapse. Two
things that they're maybe not questions, but just food for thoughts on this.
Yes,
and then one of them is that if I remember correctly, the foreman talks about them bringing on more generators. So there's no specific comment about them testing this machine prior to that. So they may have run this machine a little earlier at lower power settings.
Yes, there was a note.
Yeah,
there was a note from the security chief about that. They ran it at half power, and it was performing better than they thought it would.
Yeah.
So they probably had like a generator on hand, maybe from before. Like it was an emergency generator that the mine had. Powered it, saw that it was working, and thought, let's get more generators to see what its true potential was. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and then the other thought process, you were talking about the bunkers. Maybe this is what made Great Bear such the perfect place to do this test. They had a mine that was abandoned that they could build this machine underground, and they had these bunkers, which you and I were talking about this the other day. If you look at the computers in there, some of these are predated even before Rudiger. They look more Cold War. And maybe these were just the perfect place to set up listening posts for the machine.
Yeah.
Seismic, whatever, whatever sensors or whatever, to see how far it's reaching out. And obviously they were testing it at lower powers at that point.
Yeah.
And that's when they started taking they noticing people were getting ill over whatever's happening.
That's where I believe Rudiger was going to. During a couple of different instances where he disappears, he went to the bunkers most likely to do whatever work. Maybe there's some secret. There is definitely a secret component to the project that a lot of the workers didn't know about, and for sure the security chief didn't know about. There was a kind of like a secret. Like no one knew what the machine was actually going to do except for Rudiger.
Everybody was on a need-to-know basis.
Yeah, maybe the bunkers were for that. Like that was the other part where they're like monitoring everything and seeing what's going on.
Yeah.
But I should let people know, Rudiger did not know that these side effects, the virus, not really a virus, condition is probably the better way to describe it. He did not know would happen. That was something that never came up until they actually tested the machine. Any other thoughts, Kirk?
No, I think I covered the two that I had. I was just looking through chat here.
I'm going to keep in mind that question about the machine driving people crazy, because that is important. But I'm looking and I don't see if there's anything major here. I get the feeling there is an umbrella cell outbreak happening in PM. We'll get to that. Let's save anything relating to Perseverance Mills to the very end, because it is important here, potentially. And we still don't know that's not really confirmed yet, but we'll know hopefully soon. Okay. So we are at the point where the machine has been turned on, and everyone within its proximity starts to feel this uneasy feeling in their head. Like, their brain is being tickled. It's a fuzzy feeling, according to the security chief. A little later, the foreman says it's like the lights were turned off in his head. There's something going on. Rudiger notes that it is like a cascading energy. It kind of flowed from the machine and was, well, we don't know what it was doing to them, but I speculated that it is kind of altering the mind in a way that was unintended, obviously, but it's something that maybe was ahead of its time, kind of. So we know in real life that the mind works through electrochemical reactions, essentially, or biochemical reactions. So chemical reactions occur in the brain, and that sends what is essentially an electrical signal between the brain cells. That's how our mind works. That's how memory is stored. That's how, you know, all of the functions of our body is carried out. And the brain is responsible for pretty much everything. So if this machine is generating energy that is affecting your brain, it's understandable why all of the different symptoms come up. And sorry, I think I need a drink real quick.
No, go ahead.
A little bit of water. The first 5G tower messing with people's minds. Yeah. I think it's like that, like the worst case scenario, Wi-Fi messing with people's brains, kind of.
Well,
Yeah.
there was even that conspiracy theory about what was happening in Cuba.
Mhm.
Where they were using something like that caused people to have issues. Some
The
kind of
Havana syndrome, I
microwave.
believe is what it was called.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether that's true or not,
Yeah,
but
we're kind of along that similar lines, kind of. Maybe that's where the inspiration came from. Was the Havana? When did that happen? Was that before The Long Dark was made?
don't remember.
If
It's
you-
been like
yeah.
8 years or so.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Maybe, you never know. Because 8 years ago, Wintermute was, I think, what, barely released?
Yeah, so
I
that
don't
would
know.
play
And then
into the
and then it
tales
had-
easy enough.
And then
Yeah.
it had the rewrite, so things could have changed then. But yeah, so I will quickly go over like all the different symptoms kind of in the order that they occur, because some of them are much more severe. So we start with that uneasy feeling in the head, and then we get to the dreaming, which is really interesting. After they noticed the machine was causing these symptoms, they started, doing the interviews with the medical officer, and they found that the people were dreaming for some reason, and the dreams were often different memories from their past, memorable events, things that they remember the most because there's some kind of event that happened that is difficult to forget. And those dreams would eventually kind of alter over time. Like they would have the same dream over and over again. And over time, the memory of that dream would change because the brain is more or less breaking down and they're forgetting everything. So memory loss is another issue, as well as the dreams. Eventually people start to literally wander around, and I suspect this might be like sleepwalking in a way, or maybe daytime sleepwalking, where they're awake fully but they're wandering around, potentially falling down a pit and dying or getting lost. So at some point they had to literally lock people away because they couldn't trust them being on their own anymore. Rudiger mentioned emotional volatility and lack of inhibition. Basically, you just become super emotional and you don't control your emotions whatsoever. So you kind of just start losing it. You lose your mind, essentially. Loss of focus. Basically, you can't focus on anything. Your mind just kind of blanks out. I think sleep deprivation is also one of the symptoms, as well as insomnia. Anything to do with the brain and sleeping. Because we know that in survival mode, insomnia is a side effect of the machine because of the glimmer fog. But I don't think glimmer fog was a thing until the first flare, until the Quiet Apocalypse. Because it's a giant energy event that's hitting the Earth essentially every aurora. So I don't believe that glimmer fog was around back then, but insomnia could still have been one of the side effects. It's just never mentioned. We'll talk about the water thing later because that's more important for after we're done with the tale. I'm looking at the comments. There's a couple of comments mentioning water, and we definitely need to talk about it. But let's.
And Francosis has got some good questions too, but they're kind of downwind from where we're at.
Francois.
Yeah. Is it Francois?
Okay.
Uh,
Yes.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
He says regarding Astrid and why she had to work on the cure discreetly
Yeah.
without her
We'll talk
employers
about.
knowing.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
downwind from where we are. So
Yeah.
we'll get there.
We'll talk about all of that later. I want to get through the story of the tales first, and then we can discuss like all of the other things that may or may not be connected. So we've got tons of different symptoms. The worst one, of course, is death, and I believe death is literally part of the whole condition, illness, whatever we want to call it. The medical officer makes note that this is not like a normal disease, virus, bacteria, whatever. This is all internal. There are no scars whatsoever. It's just in the head, essentially, in your brain. And the only way to treat it right now, at this point in the tale during that time period, was to literally get as far away from the machine as possible and write and play mental games and just do anything you can to keep your mind as sharp as possible. Maintaining your focus was the only way to prolong the inevitable, which was death. Ever since we've collectively, as the community, figured out, you mentioned a lot of mentions of writing and keeping your focus all throughout not only the tales, but also in a couple places in Wintermute. So keep that in mind in the future, not just for episode 5, but in Black Frost. If you ever notice someone talking about, like in a note or buffer memory or whatever, they're talking about writing and trying to keep focus and talking about water in their dreams or their thoughts, that is a red flag right there for this outbreak, essentially. Maybe not from the Langston mine, but also from Perseverance Mills. And I think at that point, once the outbreak has been recognized, they turn off the machine, and regardless, the damage is done. There's nothing that can be done. So at that point, the only thing they can do is evacuate. So the project is more or less done because they can't move forward. This is one of those moments where Rudiger disappears again. And this time he leaves a note to the security chief that he's promising a resupply. That is, I believe, the very end of Signal Void. But at this point, the foreman's notes from Buried Echoes have already passed. So that's why we're doing it in chronological order, because half of Signal Void, or half of Buried Echoes, takes place during the time of Signal Void. So, it makes more sense this way. Sorry, I will probably take a couple of drinks of water every so often, because this is a lot of talking.
It is.
And I'm not used to this. Even during, doing voiceover for videos, this is a little more than that.
You take breaks.
Yeah. So machine is off. Rudiger has gone to who knows where, but I suspect that is when he goes back to the bunkers and he leaves behind pieces of evidence from the tales, from all three of them, or the first two, I guess, leaving the evidence, locked away so no one can find it. And maybe this is when he decides that this data from this project cannot go to John Industries ever, because there's a lot of potential for what happened with this machine, both in terms of geology, but also the other part, the side effects. I told this to Kirk yesterday. The machine is the potential for being a weapon. And that's, I think Castle brought up earlier, the Umbrella Corporation from Resident Evil. This is something I've also been thinking for a while. What if John Industries got their hands on that data and decided to weaponize the machine's blueprints and the data from the experiment, sell it to the highest bidder? This is just a corporation that's trying to make money any way possible. They're mostly interested in science for sure, so they're funding different science projects, most likely including Rudiger's. I don't know if they've done more than just this one. So Rudiger at some point decides this data needs to disappear. So he returns from wherever he went. I think it's from the bunkers, but I don't know. And this is at the point where Buried Echo starts. He returns to the Langston mine at the same time. They're all evacuating. They're trying to leave through helicopter. The security chief leaves her note on the helicopter that was supposed to leave, but crashed. And then we can find that helicopter at the very beginning of Buried Echoes. And in that, she wrote to her colleague that would turn out to be her lover later on in one of her later notes. and she would move forward with her plan. Her plan was to confront Rudiger and destroy the machine. And when she does find him, they discuss like I don't know what exactly they discuss, but she talks about the project, like what's going on, what was the intent here, and I guess she didn't like his answer because what he said to her was kind of like a clue for where we would go later on to follow Rudiger. All he told her was that there's a transmission site and that he was planning to escape the data. I believe that's what more or less what he told her, but she doesn't say exactly that. She just says that he had a way out. There was a transmission site. He risked everything and they risked it all, or he risked nothing and they risked it all, which is not necessarily true. And this is one of the things that I love about the tales a lot is that the first tale kind of is more of a dark mystery. Like, it presents us with a dark secret that has been buried underground on the island for a long time. We don't know a lot of details about it, but it's kind of terrifying. It makes you kind of scared because those interviews some of those get kind of dark and scary. Like, the mind is a terrifying thing, especially in this condition. And then we get to Buried Echoes, and Buried Echoes does a really good job of painting Rudiger as the bad guy. And then we get to Last Horizon and we learn Rudiger was never a bad person. He was just misguided. He was blinded by his own ambitions and he was trying to do something, but it ended up failing and hurting a lot of people. And so he regretted that even up to the final moments of his life before he, did the thing that he did at the end of Last Horizon. So that evolution of the story is incredible. And I love that turn from Buried Echoes to Last Horizon, painting Rudiger as this awful, evil scientist who he was just a scientist. He wasn't doing anything wrong. And he was actually doing the right thing at the very end, trying to rid the world of this data and hiding the truth of the experiment so that no one could be hurt by it again. That's why I love Buried Echoes so much. And Last Horizon 2. Those are my two favorites. So after the confrontation, the security chief goes and destroys the machine as much as she can. Obviously, we can see even 40 years later, after the first flare, the machine still works somewhat, but it is damaged more or less permanently so that it cannot affect us as badly as it could during, the time of Rudiger's project. But there's still the glimmer fog, so that's still something that the machine is capable of doing. Fortunately, hopefully that is the worst thing it is doing to us in survival mode. Maybe Hinterland chose to not gamify more, mental afflictions for a reason, but it's possible it may be having effect on the animals. We just never know. And that would be the end of Buried Echoes, where she passes away in the bunker, in the Langston mine, in the chamber next to the machine. She leaves that last note and just kind of fades away. It's a very touching, sad moment in the tales. I think that's the not the climax, but like the peak moment of the full trilogy for myself, was that moment where we listened to her final breaths, her final moments of life, writing a love letter to her, her former colleague, who I believe might have worked at John Industries, but we don't really know. And then that's the end of that, unfortunately.
She kind of reminds me of the innocent bystander. She represents the innocent bystanders. There were a lot of them. A lot of the miners, the engineers, everybody was involved in this and what happened. But I think it's her story that kind of amplifies this is what happened to the people that were on the sidelines. They didn't really know what was going on. They were there to do a job, and this stuff was happening around them.
Yeah, the foreman does note that he felt bad once this is in Last Horizon, he felt bad for the others. Like, he couldn't get to the security chief in time to tell her the truth, because when he found her, she had already passed away, and it even hurt him to keep everyone else in the dark.
And I think he had to keep his cover. He couldn't blow the lid off his own cover.
Yeah.
This reminds me of that movie. Oh God, I don't remember the name. What the one where they decipher, where Alan Turing deciphers the Enigma machine, and they finally figure and they crack the code, and he's like, we can't tell anybody that we cracked the code
Mm-hmm.
because once the Germans find out, they'll know. So
Yeah.
I think he had that kind of same thing. That unfortunately people had to die around him because he had a job and he couldn't reveal that he was basically a double agent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm seeing questions here. So one was Old Man Spiker. Didn't the machine run off of a whole generator? Yes, it ran off of a series of generators originally. I saw one about the Auroras. The Auroras probably supercharged the machine, giving it more power than it ever had before. That's probably true. That's why it's literally, because before we only knew that it was affecting the mine, the interior. But now with the energy of the Auroras, it's got the potential to reach out multiple regions. If the machine was even more in better condition than it was, it would have probably covered the whole island in Glimmerfog. But fortunately, it was mostly destroyed. And then, of course, the first flare probably also damaged it as well, but we don't know. It's not connected to the power grid, but it's got its own internal power system, I guess, with the generators. So the potential for the machine doing more damage is there. It's just we have the security chief, fortunately. Ooh. Hopefully you didn't hear that. That was a airplane or like a jet or something flying above me.
Just fly overhead. Piccolo, yeah, Imitation Games. That's that's the movie I was thinking of. Kind of in that light that when they figured out what the answer was, they couldn't say anything. They had to pick and choose what they were going to interact with. It's kind of a sad truth of letting people.
Francois, John is a German surname? ? Yes, or maybe just a name. I don't know if it's a surname.
Yeah.
I couldn't find a lot of information on it. It's like a uncommon spelling of Johann, but it's pronounced John. I don't know why.
An acronym type name.
Yeah.
Too.
I found like one source for it, and they said John, so I just went with it.
And a foolish. I don't know if this is a question or more of just a clarification. In that we see the aurora at night. The aurora is an effect from what's going on with the solar. You don't see it during the day because the fact that the sun is lighting the sky, and so the light from the sun overpowers the aurora effects. So that may be where part of that glimmer fog is too.
Yeah.
Obviously, too, it's new written into the game, and there's going to be limitations and what have you.
Yeah, it's a side effect of the auroras.
Yeah.
Powering the machine. The machine, I don't know why it's delayed, but the release of that energy is delayed, sometimes a day or two.
Yeah, and I was thinking, I wonder if there aren't other pieces that we're not seeing, because some of the things I was looking at, too, is like they had these generators, but, you also have, like, capacitors that would store up big chunks of energy and then release it all at once. So maybe these capacitors are charging in the background, and even the security chief didn't even know they were there. So, there's always these little hidden things you don't know behind the scenes, but that would be something that they could use to store up energy and then hit it with a big charge.
Yeah.
The other thing, too... Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, I was going to say, the other thing, too, that I've noticed, too, and I think this is to amplify the power of the auroras, is the new visual effects. You see it at Quonset. You see it on the electrical lines where these sparks are coming out much stronger. And I think that's the visual thing is it's really kind of amplifying. This is how powerful this is. This electrical charge is much more powerful than what we're thinking.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is I found this is the original. This was the famous person example for the name John. I just happened to find this randomly, and I think it might be where the name John comes from the Tales, but also a different moment in the lore as well. So Hans Henny John, it's John G-A-N-N, or G-H-G, sorry, words, J-A-H-N-N, so the same spelling in the game, was a German playwright, novelist, and organ builder. And there is a character in the game called G.W. John, who is the architect for BlackRock, and he was also an organ builder as well. So there's some, you know,
Art imitating
yeah,
life.
this is the real life person that founded John Industries, I think, and also the architect for BlackRock. There is a connection. That is a really interesting thing that I noticed when I was doing the BlackRock lore videos. The person that would end up founding John Industries is the same person that built BlackRock. So I'm guessing they built BlackRock, founded some kind of corporation, and then, you know, exploded in size later on, because that would have been 100 years prior to Wintermute. And so John Industries is kind of like the legacy of GW John. I think it's GW, I don't remember. But there is a interesting connection to BlackRock, and actually there's more connections to BlackRock and some of the side quests as well. We'll talk about those maybe later, but we'll see. Okay, so we're on the final stretch here. So let me just do this quickly, because there's actually not a lot going on in Last Horizon. They kind of stretched it out a little bit, and they make you do this wild goose chase around the region. So you start at the weather station, and then from there it takes you to the cabin down below. It's just the foreman chasing after Rudiger, and I believe this takes place over the course of weeks, maybe a month, but who knows. It's definitely a while. The foreman reveals that he is a mole, essentially, for a group called the Board, and I believe that's just the board of John Industries. He's been a part of the project since the beginning, and he's been spying on Rudiger. And even Rudiger notes that he definitely knew there was a mole, and that he's been, in his first note in Last Horizon, he notes that he's being stalked. So he knows that there's someone out there. Yeah, the first half of Last Horizon's more or less like wild goose chase. It's like the second half where it gets better, in my opinion. There's more details that come up, that sort of thing. So this is when the foreman mentions, yeah, he felt bad that he couldn't reach the security chief in time to tell her the truth. Unfortunately, found her passed away already. And then her notes actually is how he found out where Rudiger went. The note about the transmission site is how he found out. And so eventually he tracks him down to the settlement that is like right below the weather station. And in there, Rudiger leaves a note. You know, it's just, I don't remember these notes as well as the other ones, but in the first one, I think it's him talking about how, you know, he was right. He was just, you know, the experiment didn't, you know, pan out quite like how he wanted it to. That sort of thing. He does eventually mention EW here at some point during Last Horizon. And he also, you know, needs to carry on with his plan. He originally planned to use the transmission site, I think maybe at the weather station, to try to get the data out of or off the island. But I don't know if that worked or not. I don't know if he ever went to the weather station. And so that's when he decides to go to the high peak. And from there, there's that little, I think it's a satellite dish or something where you can like transmit data from to a satellite, because this is the 80s. There's
Might have been
in space,
microwave or
right?
satellite. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, yeah, I mean, he was able to use a satellite dish to send something off the island to who knows where. But that's the data that he was trying to get rid of and keep it out of John Industries' hands. And at the high peak, he notes that he's starting to fade away as well. Like his mind is starting to fall apart. Fortunately, he was able to climb the mountain, but like mentally, he's starting to fall apart. He does know he's starting to see, you know, memories or dreams in his head about the ocean. And that may be because, you know, he's a scientist. He's probably traveled the world many times over, probably on research vessels traveling across the ocean. So that makes sense. We'll talk about the dreams and the memories and the water stuff later, because it is important. It comes up a lot. The only person I think it never came up for was the foreman. I don't think he ever got a chance to mention anything like that. And this whole time the foreman is just like a few steps behind him. That note at the top, I think, is when he mentions his brother, which a lot of people point to that it could be a connection to Sutherland. but I don't think so. I personally don't believe that Sutherland has anything to do with this tale. I don't think Sutherland is the foreman. I don't think the brother mentioned is Wyatt. That's a story for another day, though. Let's see. I'm looking at the chat here.
I think his brother was definitely somebody who was doing a job similar to his.
Yeah,
because he said that his brother would like this op.
We learn a lot about the foreman there. He works kind of like in this field of espionage. He has some kind of debt that he's trying to pay off, and that's why he's working for John Industries. And his brother, did something similar. So, while
he's kind of like a hired gun, he's a mercenary.
A mercenary,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Some people say that that's a connection to Sutherland, but I don't see it. I don't know. We'll talk about that another time. The foreman's backstory is interesting, though. So from the high peak, we enter the final stage of Last Horizon, which takes you all the way back to Omega Bunker for some reason. But there's a secret room that I guess very, very few people knew about. Also, the interesting thing about Last Horizon is that there's like Polaroids for every single note, I think, or most of the notes, that like direct you to where to go, which I loved as a method of like telling you the story. Like, this is kind of like your waypoint. It's this Polaroid. You just gotta find it. There's no actual waypoint in the world. But that Polaroid that tells you to go to Omega Bunker, it's just kind of like a wall. I think, right? Or, I don't remember if it's like the wall that's there.
It shows that hidden. Yeah,
it shows the hidden chamber, right?
False wall. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. So the foreman tracks him down to Omega Bunker. I guess just kind of taking a guess. I don't know how, but eventually, he finds Rudiger and he sees him there. Rudiger at this point is like on his deathbed. He's not gonna make it because his brain is crumbling, just like the rest of the project members. The foreman did note that sorry, I'm getting like hiccups all of a sudden. The foreman mentioned that he wasn't immune, but he's definitely wasn't affected as much as the others, and so he was able to carry on until the very end of Last Horizon, where he was starting to get that feeling that he was gonna go eventually, like very soon. And so he requests Rudiger to hand over the data and also asks if there was a cure, and he had neither of those because the side effects of the machine were not something known. It only came up during the experiment. It was never his intention. And again, not many people knew the nature of the experiment, so like even the side effects he didn't know about because that wasn't part of the experiment. That wasn't part of the plan. From there, it becomes more apparent that the foreman is starting to lose his mind because this is when Rudiger says, because the foreman kind of yells at him like, "Where is the data?" Foreman tells him to calm down because he's getting more emotional, which is a sign of the outbreak of the illness. And in a last ditch effort to kind of redeem himself by apologizing, regretting what happened and the pain and suffering that his experiment caused, he pulls out a gun, and the foreman was fortunately faster and put Rudiger down. So Rudiger canonically is dead in the bunker. Sorry if this is a spoiler for a content drop that came out 8 months ago.
Gosh, I didn't know he died.
Wait, when did that come out? No, that was a year ago.
I know.
It's been over a year. Oh my god. Last Horizon came out a year ago. That's crazy.
Isn't it?
I think we're well past spoiler alerts for the tales. Rudiger dies in Omega Bunker, and the foreman is left to escape. But there's like a feeling in his head and he writes it down. It's maybe I shouldn't escape. And I made a video kind of following that line, like, a speculative video about it, because there are some people that are on Great Bear Island, even up to the time of the first flare, that clearly have been affected by this machine. They're still alive somehow. It's possible that the foreman's still on the island, even up to the first flare. Because it's like he says, maybe he shouldn't escape this island. Like maybe this is his tomb. He will live the rest of his life here and die here. And there'll always be a shadow of the memory of the machine and the mine in his head. That's just my speculation for a side quest that you can find in Wintermute episode 4, which we can talk about if people have questions about it, but those are like kind of like offshoots. There's nothing confirmed, but there's the telltale signs that some of the side quests have characters relating to the tale or tales. That's where the Tales trilogy Rudiger's project ends, but obviously there is a lot of questions left unanswered. Like, where did the data go? Did someone find the data? Like, we have the Perseverance Mill side of things, and there's some eerily similar things going on there. So someone got the data. We have Kirk's theory, which we can talk about real quick, about the bunkers. So at this point, I think it's just time to open up the chat for questions, because there's a lot of them I can see already.
Yeah. I will say, Old Man Spiker, you nailed it on the head with the spoiler thing. Yes, the Titanic sinks. Yeah, if you've watched the movie Titanic, you didn't realize how it was going to end, then you obviously are not a good reader of history. But yes, you nailed it on the head with that one.
Okay, this is a more recent one, but Eldritch God mentions Wintermute is the last name of a 1950s basketball star. Raphael himself has debunked that as the origin of the word, I believe, on the forums.
Yeah. Now, there was topic. There's one a little further up here. Somebody was talking about a book with the name John and written by Rudiger.
Oh, yes. Another complete coincidence. There's been a book written by Hans Henny John by Rudiger Wagner.
That'll be interesting to see what that book is about.
Written about. Yeah. Someone at Hinterland, it might be Raphael, has either like a love for German culture and history, and German names, or there's German influence because they're partially German. I don't know who it is, but there's Rudiger obviously is a German name. John is a German name. In Pleasant Valley, in the radio station, it's playing a lot of Richard Strauss, Richard Strauss, is that his name? I believe so.
Yeah, I think you're right.
A German composer.
There's a lot of German influence.
Yes, a lot of German influence in the game, kind of like in the side characters and the names. Richard Strauss, German composer. Someone at Hinterland, it's probably Raphael if I had to guess, is influencing the game a little bit and including a lot of German words and culture and stuff like that into the game. Any other questions?
I'm scrolling back up through here. Elijah said, Grey Mother is blind, but she remembers the whole night of the first flare and obviously her daughter. I feel like the machine concerning Grey Mother is a bit far-fetched.
Let me clarify that part. That was the question from earlier. The machine is only responsible for what happened in the Langston mine, like Rudiger's machine. It did not have the reach to affect the whole island.
I think that leads into what you're saying about why the foreman and Rudiger weren't as affected as the other people.
Yeah,
proximity to the machine
and
duration of exposure had a huge play in the whole thing.
Rudiger had disappeared a few times, so like he wasn't as affected. They lasted longer.
Yeah.
I'll bring up the two examples from Wintermute. In episode 4, there are 2 side quests. It's the power worker, the lost power worker one, and the conspiracy theorist side objective for, I think it was Blackhawk Rumors. Both of those side quests will lead you to different notes, and those notes have those signs about like writing and losing focus and losing your memory, and even mentioning water. That has been in the game since episode 4, and that's years before the tales were even released. So this has been in the background. They've been writing up to this point for Wintermute, but the tales is kind of like an extra, it's like to clarify what's happening in Wintermute, and I'm sure we'll get some more clarification in episode 5, but it's like the lead up to what is happening in Perseverance Mills, and it's, you know, there's hints of it throughout the island. Sutherland also has some of those telltale symptoms and signs. He has, you know, memory problems. He has, you know, he mixes up different thoughts in his head. He even says he feels like he's going crazy. But I think his affliction is more recent. It's not anything to do with the Tales trilogy or
Maybe
Or the
more
machine.
to do with Perseverance Mills. He
That's
also
what I'm
talks a
thinking.
lot about going to water. He had to
Mhm.
go to water.
Oh, he's a huge fan of water. He
Yeah.
lives on the water essentially.
When the
And that-
lights went off, I needed to get to sea.
Mhm.
He mentions that in that early conversation.
Yeah. That's one reason why I don't believe Sutherland is related to the Tales, the Rudiger's project, is because when he talks about his backstory, talking about how like he's a fisherman, he's sailed the 7 seas or whatever, he's done odd jobs all over the world about relating to fishing. That part of his backstory is very convincing because it's more cohesive and it's more believable. But when he talks about other things that are less important to him, I think that's when he starts to scramble his thoughts, like mentioning his brother, you know, all of that, everything about his brother is just completely scrambled. But when he talks about water, about his fisherman's life, all of that is crystal clear. And that's why I think the water connection is rather strange, and it's very consistent across the whole 4 tales, as well as some of those characters from Wintermute in those side quests. Water comes up a lot, so I believe that Sutherland is more related to what's happening in Perseverance Mills than what happened in the mine. Sutherland's backstory doesn't say that he would ever step in a mine and work as a miner or whatever.
Well, and plus it would be very believable for him to have gotten jobs
Mm-hmm.
in different parts of the world because this is post-collapse.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going back through chat here
Yeah.
because we had a couple of really good questions early on, and so Francois was talking about regarding Astrid and why did she
Yeah.
have to work on the cure discreetly without her employer knowing about it? Was she working for the company originally funded by Rudiger's work? I'll let you answer, but I also have my thoughts on that.
Yeah,
as
I
well.
don't believe so. I think like we know that there's a quarantine going on in Perseverance Mills, and it seems like no one else on the island knows about it. We already know that there's like communication problems already, but thanks to survival mode with the recent update, we have the radio network that was, you know, put together by the civilians. Even with that, with all the radio towers, with the landlines, with satellite phones, none of that was able to communicate that there was an outbreak on the island. So no one knows about it. It's discreet for a reason. So I think I think we can all, it's safe to assume there was another machine on the island. It's probably much smaller. It's near Perseverance Mills. It's why there's an outbreak there. Whoever built that, or whoever built whatever affected Perseverance Mills, that is the, you know, whoever got their hands on the data essentially. Seraphim, I don't believe is related to John Industries or whoever is responsible for the Perseverance Mills outbreak. Seraphim is the solution to that problem, and it's probably a government funded facility, if I had to guess, or a company, maybe like an extension of the CDC in a way, like, but a Canadian version of it, whatever that would be called. So they're just trying to make the cure, but they're trying to keep it discreet because this is all secret. No one knows about this outbreak because it's kind of terrifying when you think about it. If this were to spread or if there was panic, it would cause a lot of problems. So it's better to keep it secret. So yes, Astrid, you know, has to work on it because that's her job, but she does break protocol, and spoilers for episode 3, she steals it. That was years ago, so that's fine to say. We already talked about it here anyways.
The Titanic sunk.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's kind of where I was going to
Astrid's-
go with my explanation was that she wasn't working on it just by herself.
Yeah, it was
Seraphim
a whole
as
company.
a company was working on the cure, except it was locked behind, you know, firewalls, so to speak. and she had to steal it. That's why she didn't want Mackenzie asking questions. It was to cover him from, plausible deniability. She didn't want to drag him into jail for what she had done.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, she stole the deal based on the conversation that she has with the lady that you see at the end of, was it episode 4? Right? Where she's in the canoe?
Jace.
Yeah.
Oh,
Jace.
no, that's Astrid, you mean in the canoe, yeah.
Yeah, Astrid's in the canoe, but that's who she's talking to on the phone.
Yes, the one that she talks on the phone in the Seraphim cutscene, that is Jane Yang in the credits.
Yeah.
That's the woman that you see at the end of episode 4.
So
Eldritch God had a question. Yeah, but what was the experiment? Like, what requires a geological unstable location? Okay, so this is I did a whole video on this. It's called what is Rudiger's New Horizon or whatever. So we know his field of science is geology, and he's really particularly interested in the geology of Great Bear Island. It's unstable. It's literally morphing and shifting the island all the time, producing earthquakes. This is like in an era where we're still trying to understand how earthquakes and seismology works. And so what I believe the machine was, and the intention was to measure the inside of the earth, every single layer, thanks to the fault lines and all that, send some kind of either energy or seismic waves or sound waves through the earth, like the full earth. And we do that in real life. We can measure seismic waves as they bounce through all the layers of the earth. And then when they bounce back and hit I forget what it's called, the stations where we measure seismic waves, they bounce back and we can literally measure like the time difference between when like the P waves and the S waves arrive. It also, the measurements are affected by the rock thickness, the composition of the rock. We can determine how the earth, indirectly, we can determine how the earth is structured below ground, what type of rocks and minerals it's made of, how hot it is, how viscous the rock is, how thick the rock layer is. All of that data can be interpolated from seismic graphs, essentially.
And all those seismometers that are all over the planet,
that's what
they can pinpoint the epicenter of an earthquake within feet.
Yeah,
of
through
where
triangulation.
It happened. Yeah.
So that's what his machine was. It was basically just an extra fancy seismometer. What did you say?
A seismometer.
Seismometer. I used to be a geology major. This is embarrassing. I was a geology major before game design.
And this is what you and I were talking about last night, because this is where the age difference between the two of us kind of comes into play here.
It helps.
So in 1980, computers were essentially very basic. I mean, we're talking about, you got hertz of CPU power. It wasn't even megahertz. It was hertz. Things were very slow and chaotic, and there was no GUI, and everything had to be typed in. It was all words, and so it was a much different time frame for that. So things like this thing with, we didn't understand all the details that we know now about how the depths of the earth and all this stuff. So I think what Rudiger was trying to do was to develop a means to take basically an MRI or an X-ray of what's going on beneath the surface of your feet. And so now, that you watch any, Expedition X show with Josh Gates, they got ground penetrating radar, they have LiDAR. One of the latest things they're using is called muons, where they take muons.
That sounds like a Pokemon name.
It does, doesn't it? It's where I'm a big fan of quantum physics documentaries. So they take muons, and they actually can, because they flow through the earth like tachyons, and they can measure them, and they can actually use that because of the speed that they go through different materials, and the different speeds give them, thickness and where things are. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. So, I mean, you're talking about, if you rewind the clock back to the 80s, I mean, at this point, we were just getting off of leaded gas.
Yeah.
Figuring out that was bad. So.
Yeah, so whatever the machine was actually doing, it was originally meant to measure and model the inside of the Earth, which goes along with the EW, the real life EW, trying to model the Earth and create something so accurate that it could revolutionize the entire field of geology. That's where Rudiger's New Horizon was going to come into play, was revolutionizing geology and geophysics.
You know, and there's a lot of examples. I'm trying to think of a few of them where scientists have discovered things when they weren't looking for the thing that they were doing. The ones that kind of come to mind are like, I think when 3M or DuPont, I can't remember, when they created Teflon, they were doing chemistry for something completely different.
Yeah.
And it just
that
happened.
happens a lot, actually.
And then I was thinking the other one was like Madame Curie.
Uh-huh.
She had no idea that the radiation that she was learning existed was killing her.
Yeah.
You know,
which is very unfortunate.
Yeah. So there's a lot of those. Hey, we're looking for X and Y is happening.
Penicillin.
Yeah.
Eldritch God mentioned penicillin as well.
Yeah. So I mean, that happens a ton. Too. That happens a ton. So accidental.
Yeah.
Unintentional circumstances.
There's a lot of questions. I wish I could answer them all. So, Castle, your question is good. So we have the radio network, the radio towers on the island. They're all over the place. And then we have the transmitter system. The transmitter system is different. That's for signal triangulation. So similar to how we triangulate, the epicenter of an earthquake with seismometers. The handheld radio is used to triangulate a signal, but it needs transmitters to be active. Otherwise, it doesn't work. The radio system is more for communication, like over the radio talking to each other. That's different.
This is the same way your phone knows where you're at.
So GPS. the same radio towers that we use in episode 2 and 3 to talk over the radio are the same radio towers that are connecting the radios for the trader. It's all the same thing, essentially. And that's why we don't need the transmitters to talk to the trader, because it's not required. Yeah,
the trader is more. I look at that as more like shortwave. It's like a shortwave radio.
It's using those radio towers that are all over the place. So I guess Will's sabotaging some of the towers in the Muskeg didn't affect that, but because game, that's fine.
Yeah.
Let me scroll back a bit because I want to make sure we didn't miss anything.
Yeah, and just so you know, shortwave radios don't require towers, next to each other. They actually bounce their signals
off the
ionosphere.
Yeah.
So, and the larger your tower you have, the bigger the bounce. So yeah, and I'm scrolling up too here.
I think if I go too far back, we'll miss some of the newer ones.
Yeah.
If you have a good question and you want to repeat it in the chat, that's totally fine. Hopefully we'll get to it. Do you want to bring up your theory here? You kind of mentioned it earlier.
Oh, yeah. I've been, ever since we started talking about the story mode and all that, you kind of got me to open my eyes. I'm the worst player in the world. I'm so pinpoint focused on, ooh, let's get to the next scene. Ooh, let's get to the next scene. And I sometimes forget to smell the roses along the way. So I have to say thank you. You've opened my eyes to being more
I appreciate
astute.
that I can help.
You've opened my eyes to be more paying attention to the details and such. And in paying attention to the details recently, I kind of stumbled upon something in the bunkers that caught my attention. And I can kind of understand why Toasty might not have noticed this, because this is something that comes with being, in my late 50s. And that is, in 3 of the 4 bunkers, in Omega, the one in Hush River Valley, and the one that is in Bleak Inlet, there are 3 generations of computers. There are computers that are there that are using the old, and if you watch any movie from the 60s and 70s, look at any documentary about NASA, they have these they look like big reel-to-reels. There's some magnetic tapes that have the programs on them. That was what a computer was. When you bought a computer back in the 60s, you were buying a department store size thing. They were
Yep.
massive. They were huge. They weren't a desktop thing. If you go back to one of the biggest analogies is that your phone has 5,000 times more computing power than they had on Apollo when they landed on the
Hmm.
moon. There was nothing. They had nothing.
Yeah,
So
our phones are more powerful than the satellites that have left our solar system.
exactly, better
Yeah.
than Voyager or
Voyager 1
you
and
know,
2.
yeah,
I think there's a third
exactly.
one too as well, but
Yeah,
our
New
phones are more
Horizons.
powerful than that stuff.
Yeah, New Horizons. Just
Hmm.
just past Pluto not too long ago.
Yeah.
Um, so there's those era, and this is why Toasty had made a comment about this being that these bunkers, because they're so very well equipped, that they're probably military or government funded built. Because when you go into there, these computers that are there, computers at this time were very expensive.
Specifically
You're
Cold War bunkers, by the
Cold War
way.
bunkers. So we think these might have been listening posts or they were seismic, and this also may tie into the Rudiger thing because you got to remember the Americans and the Canadians were listening for when Russia was testing
Hmm.
nuclear weapons, the same way they were,
Yeah.
listening to us when we were bombing, Nevada and the Bikini Islands. So every nuclear test was being, we would tell them we were doing it so they didn't think they were being attacked, but they were also listening to see how big it was.
Yeah.
What were they coming up with? So that kind of ties the Cold War thing together. The second era is revealed with the false wall area where Rudiger was at. You see the
Hmm.
all-in-one, very small screen style computer. This is typical for the times. These are the types of computers
For the
I learned to
80s.
work off. They were like
Yeah.
just old IBM TRS-80, old school Apple type all-in-one computers. Then if you continue to look, there are another set of computers that are more modern that have, like mouse plugs in them that are purple and green. That's kind of a 1990s type computer. So it made me question is, were these bunkers occupied a third time? And is this related to Perseverance Mills?
Hmm.
That they were trying to maybe test this machine again and see if it was reaching into areas throughout the island.
Yeah. Because those bunkers are, if our collective estimate of Perseverance Mills is true, those bunkers are kind of far away. So like they could tell, is it actually affecting this area or not?
And the other thing I noticed too was there's a lot of speakers
Hmm.
within there, which makes you think they were listening to something that wasn't music. Because at this time we're talking about, this is about the time when Napster was coming out and music online was not the greatest. It wasn't worth listening
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, there's definitely, I was kind of swayed a little bit about that when you showed it to me last night, how there's 3 different eras of computers in some of those bunkers, which is kind of strange. It could be an oversight by Hinterland, but it also could be, maybe a hint for what's to come. Because even like
It's
on the
definitely
island
head
itself,
scratching.
even like on the island itself, we have 2 different types of computers. We have the chunky desktops from the 90s and early 2000s, and then we have the laptops. They're kind of built, they're kind of big, but they're clearly from the 2000s to 2010s, and that's roughly when the collapse occurs, like the late 2000s, early 2010s. So obviously there's a point where there's a technological wall essentially where we don't see anything too modern after that, but there's a mishmash of everything. The island is kind of like lost in time, not literally, but technologically there's stuff from all over time from the last like 50, 60 years. Any other questions here?
See, that's the other thing.
I do really like your idea though. It does make a lot more sense
It's a head
after going
scratcher
over
for
everything.
sure. And the other thing too, like
Hmm.
with the bunkers as well, um, just how well they're outfitted is
Hmm.
beyond scope. They're not the prepper caches. They're completely
Yeah.
separate from the whole
Yeah,
thing.
and we
So
know
that
the
kind of was
origin.
Yeah.
We know the origin of those prepper caches, but we don't know the origin of these bunkers. It's rather mysterious.
The other thing and this is what I was just thinking about before that too, is uh, with the tales, like you said, there's only a couple of documents that are dated. So, we think it's months. It could be months from when they did the first test to the second test, but there still had to have been even more time involved, because you and I were talking about this too last night when we were prepping for the show. Was that these things could not have all been brought in by air. They would have had to have transported this stuff by ship and then rail yarded in, unless they broke this stuff down into such small components. Because these generators and some of the equipment that's in the project room, there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot there. That would have cost a fortune.
We didn't look at it
in.
yesterday, but the control room is very similar set up to the bunkers.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money there.
I see people are talking about potatoes for some reason.
That makes all the difference in the world.
Potatoes.
When you're losing your mind, you're thinking of water and having a potato.
Oh, let's talk about the water thing real quick.
Let's do the water.
Water comes up a lot in the notes for some reason. So I've made my video about it. It's been a while since I made that, actually. But I think the general idea is that water it's a constant in our life. We need it to survive. It's all over the planet. We form a lot of fond memories with water. Some people form uncomfortable memories with water, such as being lost at a beach or drowning or whatever. And that comes up in one of the notes, the patient interview, where he gets lost on a beach or something like that. Or traveling over the ocean by boat, spending time with family on the beach or on the river or on the lake or whatever. These are memorable events that occur in our life, and they have to do with water. I think that's why water comes up consistently, at least for most of the characters in Rudiger's project. The two side characters in episode 4 that I suspect are related to the project as well, and technically also Sutherland, but Sutherland was already living a life on the water, so it makes sense why he's always bringing it up. But it's suspect that everything that he talks about when he's talking about I'm suspicious of whenever he talks about water, because it's always crystal clear, it comes up naturally. So maybe he's freshly afflicted, not a long time ago. And also, it's not mentioned directly in the Perseverance Mills side, but there is a line that I find really interesting, and it took me a while to realize what was happening. And that's when I eventually made my video about what was happening in Perseverance Mills. They mention how there are quarantine breakers drowning and washing ashore. We know that whatever's happening at Perseverance Mills may be related to Langston Mine. The Langston Mine outbreak is a mental affliction. It is affecting sleep patterns and dreams and mental focus and emotions and all that. So I believe what's happening in Perseverance Mills is that people are literally losing their minds. They're sleepwalking, going into the ocean, because they're so fixated on the water from their memories, from their past, and drowning and washing ashore. So that's why it was surprising for them to see a person come up in a boat and they weren't one of the quarantine breakers. They haven't found anyone else. It's just people from Perseverance Mills that are doing it. So that's where the water connection also is related to Perseverance Mills. It's coming up so often that it's kind of scary. And hopefully we are right, because I think collectively the whole community is in agreement that the water is very key for finding out if someone is related to the Tales or to Perseverance Mills. We'll find that out soon, hopefully. But I've had whole videos dedicated to that topic. I had a whole video just talking about water.
Well,
and how it's related to the Tales.
Like you're saying,
that's how big it is.
When them being surprised by it means it's happening a lot. They become jaded to it. So yeah, the opposite is a shock.
Occurrence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, going back to Sutherland, we'll talk about Sutherland's tale another time, maybe. But Sutherland, you know, he has the telltale signs, of course, but his backstory is believable because it's more clear, it's more cohesive. He doesn't trip up on his thoughts when he's talking about like his brother, his misanthropic father, his life on Misanthrope's Island, his brother kind of branching off and doing his own thing, him doing his own thing, his accident with his leg. Actually, I remember there was a moment where he mentioned like the accident in his leg. He talks about that, and then for some reason it confuses it with his brother doing something. I don't know, but like anything to do with his memories on the ocean, you know, fishing and all that, that was all crystal clear. But when he talked about anything else, it was all garbage, jumbled mess, and that's because his mind is falling apart. Anything that is memorable, your fond memory or something like that, that is coming up a lot. But water is consistent across everyone, pretty much. So the security chief mentions her mother's voice as being something that she likes to write about. That is something she's fond of, that she's remembering, and that she's writing about it. That's helping her keep her focus. The foreman mentions his brother. The foreman mentions his brother once, but like there's hardly enough to go off of the foreman. The patient 7 mentions a trip to the beach where he got lost as a kid, a trip to a river to swim with friends, and then he has those nightmares as well. So like, it's not only like the memorable positive events, it's also the negative ones, like anything that's really sealed, like really like how do I say it, like you can't get it out of your head no matter how brain damaged
Traumatic.
you are. It's traumatic in a good or a bad way, essentially.
Well, those are usually the memories that live with you the longest.
You hold, yeah,
something traumatic. You remember a car accident or an event, a death. There's something that brings real focus into your memory. Old Man Spiker made a comment, is this where the bodies in CH keep coming from? And Elijah was saying that. And I'm going to say that it could be for some of them, but we have to remember the lights effect, the aurora, and that it's worldwide. And so this is something I know that Toasty and I have talked about in the past when we were doing the stories, but think about all of the cruise ships, all of the cargo containers, everything out on the water. They're going to be in trouble too.
All the airplanes, all the satellites,
all the airplanes that would have been flying over the water.
Everything,
all of that
would have come crashing down or washing ashore.
It would have been cataclysmic. So this is what's going to be interesting in Black Frost, because we're going to see a different side of it. But you got to remember, there were planes flying, there were boats in the water, things happened. So these bodies could be coming from any number of these sources. I mean, look at all the bodies in the plane crash at Pleasant Valley. You know, in fact, you saved them in episode 3. So we know there's 2 plane crashes and all the smaller ones. So think about all that aircraft. Think of all those people. So yeah, that could be where these people are coming from. There's a bigger story around just Great Bear.
We're almost at an hour and a half. Do you want to take 1 or 2 more questions?
Yeah, we'll get it wrapped up.
It's up to you how long you want to go.
Yeah, and I know you've got family and
we're
things
not
going on.
We're not going the full 3 hours like Castle wanted us to.
Castle wanted a 3-hour podcast, by the way, guys, and we weren't going to do it. Although, he was saying the legendary longest podcast episode with Toasty.
Is it?
Last week, I had Zach on for almost an hour and a half. I'd have to go back and look, but it was a pretty lengthy one too. So
let's take 1 more question. A good one. Let's get a good one. Anyone have any more, are you still confused about something? You want a clarification? Any kind of question? Okay, yeah, there was the Aurora. Yeah, the Aurora is global. We already know that, thanks to Black Frost. And the ship coming in from who knows where for episode 5.
I did see one earlier, and this is from, I'm laughing at what Unholy Marie is saying, that we should continue 2 hours, but
I have a stream in an hour and a half, and I want to be drunk for that, because the game I'm playing, I can't do this for another an hour and a half.
He's got
Unless
other
I can
plans.
drink during. Unless I can drink during.
So he has other plans. He's doing me a huge
Yes.
favor by being here. So just be so grateful that he's here. And but she made a comment earlier that I thought was kind of funny that oh, let me find it here real quick. I'm sorry. I hope we get a large port city area. It seems to be missing. And yeah, we've talked about that before, Maria, about Port Mary or we need a deep water port city because these supplies are coming from somewhere. And they've mentioned it.
Need to make a video about episode 5. Before it drops, I want to make a video about everything we know about episode 5 because there's a lot. We know a lot.
Yeah.
Read the dev diaries. Everyone, promise me this. Read the dev diaries from now on, because there's I'm on the subreddit all the time, and there's always questions about like, where is episode 5? Is there any news? Read the dev diaries, and you'll get all that information because that's where 90% of the answers to those types of questions will come from. So I don't think we're gonna get a place like Port Mary because it's like a big, I wouldn't say city. It's like a small city, large town, for sure. Because it
would be the biggest city in the game.
It's mentioned once, but the lore note that talks about it makes it sound so important for the island. It's like the big harbor town. We're probably not getting that because that's a lot of level design that could honestly probably go towards Black Frost. But we're going to get an urban center in that, so I think that's totally fine. We are getting what looks like a small little harbor town, tiny one. It's a little hamlet in episode 5, but it's not Perseverance Mills. It's separate from that. So if you look in the last dev diary, I think was it the April one or December? It's one of the two. You'll see concept art for a little harbor town. It's like a little hamlet near Perseverance Mills. It's probably in the same region too. Which is really cool. So we got a good look at what the region is going to play like, at least one of the regions. We're going to have like 2 little towns at the very least. And one of them is like a mini harbor.
See, and I'm also wondering if we're going to get to see like the Suzuki radio telescope.
Yeah,
well, I think Atwood is part of that.
Because we know for sure there's at least two regions. One has to be Suzuki, and the other is Perseverance Mills. Someone did leave a good question up above. I'm sorry for dragging this out too long. About Seraphim and Suzuki. We have Lilith, the goddess of the night, the Seraphim Sleep Research Center. That's very cool. The Seraphim has to do with sleeping, the goddess of the night. And then Suzuki radio telescope, the sun god and the sun goddess being the titular gods of the Suzuki family. There's some really good, like, what would you call this? Like, bringing real life culture and media into the game. Like, there's a lot of German influence into the game. We've got a lot of Native American stuff here and there. It's not like a ton, but like there's a lot of it if you look carefully. And we have this stuff, the Seraphim and Suzuki. I didn't know that those were connected to other cultures. That's really cool.
There's a lot of little references that
I think
into the story. It's cool.
The connection to the sun god may be, confirming that's the source of the auroras. I think the game already does that, but a lot of people are so confused about the whole, where did the aurora come from? It's the sun. It's always the sun. Every aurora is from the sun, usually. Watch Toasty stream today. Yeah, sure. Why not? If it were the long deck, I would say, but it's not. It's something far worse.
But let's also do this too, though. Toasty has a huge catalog of all of these things that we talked about today, along with a lot of the other lore. It's what turned me on to the lore and the story more. And so, by all means, go over to his channel and go check out a lot of that stuff, and make sure that when you're watching it, do all the things you need to do, like and comment and stuff like that. There's a lot of information and a lot of good stuff over there. So make sure go pay some attention over there as well, because that's where a lot of this is coming from. So without all his hard work, we wouldn't be so lucky to have had him on to share all this stuff with us. So by all means.
There are playlists for everything if you're interested. There's a playlist for Rudiger's project. There's one for like the people and the places, the different regions and all that. There's one for buffer memories. There's one for Wintermute. There's one for Sutherland's Tale. If you're interested, go check it all out. Obviously, you can skip around if you want to, in case you want to keep, catch up on Wintermute or one of the tales. That's totally up to you. But I appreciate that, Kirk. Thank you so much.
And if you don't know how to get to his channel, by all means, our main channel webpage has the Creators Corner, where everybody that's been a guest on the show gets their show linked here. So, we're trying to be community oriented, and so just go on there, you click on that, and then click his playlist, and you'll find everything. It's not really hard. He's got it really nicely laid out and stuff.
And before I go, everyone leave a like.
Yes, leave a like. If you have not subscribed to the podcast, I'm asking now to please do so. We are at the time of broadcast, we were 7 people away from hitting 500. And 500 subscribers is a really big benchmark, especially with YouTube and pushing our show out to a bigger audience. It's kind of like a gate. So when we hit 500, that gate opens up and it goes out to more people. Then when you hit 1,000, it goes out a little bit more. And so by all means, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. It will help us grow and get more stuff going on that stuff. And just for Faye and Castle, I didn't get a chance to do this earlier. I'm going to do it real quick before we close out. We didn't mention Dead World, but now that I have to put money in the change jar. So I did this just for you. So now we have a sound effect for putting money in the Dead World jar.
I had to unmute the stream real quick to hear it. That was perfect.
So please push subscribe for us and all that. Toasty, any last any words other than please go over and watch his stuff? It's really good.
No, you don't have to actually. You don't need to. It's totally fine. Yeah, I'm always doing lore content on the channel. I'm also going to be branching out very soon, and by very soon I mean next week. I'm going to be starting a new game covering the lore of Raft. So if you're interested in Raft or the Long Dark, go to the channel now if you want. Check out the Long Dark content now, and starting next week, the Raft content. I'm very excited for that.
And that still falls into Survivor's Corner because that is a Survivor game. So, absolutely. Sorry, Castle. No Ellis. Ellis is reserved for when I play Left 4 Dead.
Oh, when he comes to my streams.
Yes. So if Toasty invites me back for Left 4 Dead, I'm gonna play dibs for Ellis because that's gonna be my thing now.
Oh, I will say, if you want to see Kirk's wild side, go watch my Left 4 Dead stream from last week with him.
I let my hair down a little bit, so to speak. Had a good time. Had a great time. So,
all right, let's end this record-setting podcast. I guess.
Yes.
I think this is the longest one, right?
Yeah. Well, it ranks up there for sure. So anyway, thanks everybody for joining us. And as I did last week, in a big surprise, we're gonna let Jitwire close out the show. So here we go.
Thank you all so very much for joining us, whether it was live or you're watching the recording. We really appreciate it, and we hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.